Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Tales from the Fandom. I am joined today by a cosplayer who I have had my eye on for the longest time, and I am so excited to have her join the episode today. I have Reina Valentine joining me, and I'm so excited. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast, Reina.
Thank you for having me so much. It's my first podcast ever, so I'm excited.
I have to say, I always love having people that haven't done a podcast yet, because I like being that first, like dipping the toe in the water to see how it is, because I feel like my podcast, and I'm tooting my own horn on this one, is a very like good start and open place for, getting into it and talking and just having a good time and not being like having crazy times.
Yeah. I love the vibe already. I listen to the episodes too, so I love the vibe of the other episodes also.
Ooh, out of curiosity, which ones did you take a listen to?
I cannot remember the name specifically, but there was one. It was the first one you did with the person called in on the telephone.
Oh, okay. Misa on Wheels.
That's it. Yeah. So I listened to that one. It was so, because I was just like getting a feel for like how it goes and all the goody good. And I said, this is so fun.
I always tell my guests, I'm like, I'm not going to ask like chapter titles or, book pages or where's that from? I need that information. Like, I am not here for that. I'm here for like just the very basic. How'd you get into stuff? Why do you like it? Who do you love? Like, who do you hate? If we're talking about hate, like it's just a quick, drops of exploration into fandoms that people love to kind of just get them out there.
Cool. I love it. I love it.
Now, I want to say before we start, we've got a few different topics, and there's one that we'll see how it goes, but we're not going to start off with it because I really want to start off with probably my latest obsession, which is the Witcher series.
Oh, the Witcher.
Yes. I've never played the games. I've only watched them on people's Twitch streams, and I've never read the book. So it was my first introduction was the Netflix series, and I fell in love with it hard.
Yes. I have never played the games because, full disclosure, I'm terrible at games. So I watch people play them, but I'd always been familiar with the game series because through other cosplayers. I have a lot of friends who cosplay it. And so I'd heard about it then, but I didn't know that it was a book, or it was a book series at that time. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll just live vicariously through you guys because these costumes sure do look cool. And then when someone said the Netflix series was coming out, and I was like, that's cool. And they said, it's based on a book. I said, books? I can read books. I know how to do that. Wait, I can join. So that's how I got started. Over the summer is when I really just plunged headfirst into Witcher world. And so it's just been, I just injected it into my live stream at that point after that. And now I'm just into it, and the series came out and I loved it. So I'm here. I'm here for it.
That may be one of the best quotes that I need to just write down when I go back and edit the episode. I can read. I can like that. That is so great. When I watched people stream the games because, as I've mentioned a number of times on the podcast, if people are listening, I'm not good at like first person-y action type games and doing that. Like give me a Final Fantasy, give me a strategy game, give me something where I can take my time. I can't do action anymore. It's just too much for me. So I watch people play. And when they announced the Witcher series on Netflix is when I found out that there were actually books, and I had no idea, or else I'd have been reading them because I love seeing the people who cosplay as the different characters, and it feels like a vibrant world in the video games when I'm watching them, and it's like, okay. And full disclosure, when I started into the Netflix series, I was thankfully somebody had mentioned on their Facebook page that it was like a time, like different timelines, and
Yes.
I was so appreciative of, and I don't consider that a spoiler because it
No.
helps understanding. And then at the end of the series, I found like this really great like timeline chart of the timelines and then every character's
Mhm.
timeline within it. And I was like, I get it now. And I've already started my second rewatch.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So I was thinking that same thing with the timelines because I was looking at it, and the only reason why I even caught on to the timelines in the first place at all, because in the books, like the timelines are also um they're not so linear
Hmm.
either. The only reason why I caught on was that they had like a couple little Easter eggs dropped here and there, just kind of what some characters were saying that let me know, as somebody who already was familiar with the timeline, oh, that's what they're doing with this. I see how this is going. This is a whole other time period than that. But I'm glad that like they came out later on, and like that was the first thing I told, because my mom is like big into geek stuff too, like me.
Hmm.
So that was the first thing I told her when I forced her to watch it. I was like, just so you know, here's the timeline. This, go forth. But I'm glad they came out with like a really good, just cohesive timeline that you can follow along easily. Because on my second rewatch that I did, like literally the day that I finished my first rewatch, um, oh, I wish I was joking. I literally, it was the entire weekend was Witcher only. But even like the second time around, I said, I can appreciate this even more knowing the timelines and knowing like the details and stuff. So that was super helpful.
It absolutely is. And I want to ask because you kind of got your feet wet with seeing people in cosplay with it and then found out about the books. Like how are the books? Are they because I've read a lot of fantasy books and sometimes it's hit or miss with what you're getting.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like pretty hard for me to sit down and just get engrossed in a series quickly. And so I that's why I was wary to start too, because a lot of times a fantasy series I have a hard time just like jumping into it. But the Witcher series, I have to say it was really the structure of it. The first two books are structured as short stories, and so that's kind of it. Kind of helped introduce the world and get me to buy into the world. And so I think just the structure of the books was so helpful for me to just fall in love with it quickly. I really do genuinely think that the books are awesome. There's definitely like some weird, crazy content in it. Like I can't even like go into it too much, but like it's weird stuff happens that you just got to kind of like, aha, okay, this is medieval based world. We'll just go with that. But it's nothing that's like the treatment of the characters was just excellent. The characters were all out their own agency. Like it, you buy into the world, you buy into the characters, like you buy into the story, and you care about them. And so that's really all I ask for with the series, especially one that's as vast as the Witcher series. So
Hmm.
I highly recommend the books. If you guys are more into audiobooks, those are probably some of the best audiobooks I've heard. I think Peter Kinney is the narrator for that, and he just I don't know what was in his head when he was doing those audios, but they're flawless. They really are. He's got like 8,000 voices in his head, and they all came out beautifully. So highly recommend the audiobook too.
Oh, awesome. It's definitely been fascinating with almost since like 2000-ish, once Lord of the Rings started coming out, there's always
Hmm.
been that strive for the next fantasy, the next
Yep.
thing. And I know I was talking with a previous guest who had gotten into Lord of the Rings through the movies, and then she went to go tackle the books. And I'm not sure if you've read the Lord of the Rings, but they're not the
Yes.
easiest, of books to read.
No. For sure. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm in that boat.
Yeah, it's like I give I give a lot of respect to people who get through those books because it's definitely written at a different time and a different,
Hmm.
word choice and length and verbosity and everything. But yeah,
Yeah.
the Witcher books, I'm really excited, especially how you had mentioned, that short story narrative in a number of
Hmm.
them. And it's like that way, you read it and you're in and out, and then you can do it quickly if
Yes.
you want to, or you can just take your time, whatever you want to do. And I really love like that concept that they
Yes.
have.
Yeah, that was probably like one of my favorite ways to start a series like that. Like I didn't know it until I read The Witcher, but now I really do love that structure of setting that up and just having those two books of short stories that will all feed into like the main story. At least most of
Hmm.
them will. But like it's just like little bites, little like appetizers to get into it. So it's really good.
So for someone who's read the books and gotten into it, how do you feel about the TV series? Like, did they do well? Is it comparable to it?
Oh, it was so funny because I was completely live tweeting 8 hours straight of the first time I watched it, and watching it, I found myself like nitpicking so much
Mhm.
that I had to go back a second time, and I was like, you know what? The stuff that the differences that I nitpicked on, they weren't so like the majority of them weren't so grievous as I initially thought. Like because I initially loved it off the bat anyway, but of course I was just like, but that one part though, like so. But it's like it's one of those things where I I think that the series did an excellent job of adapting it. It's not once I got out of my head that it's not word for word, and
Mhm.
some changes I absolutely did not agree with. Some most changes I thoroughly love because I do think Lauren Hisrich, the showrunner, she's got such a good grasp on the story she wants to tell and the characters that she wants to present that even with the changes, I trust her. And so I think that it was really important for me to stop seeing the TV series as a carbon copy visual of the words that I read or the words I listened to. And once I did that, literally it was only the second run through. I was in it. I said, okay, that's it. That's all I needed. I just needed to get out of my head with this. So, my opinion, I thought the TV show did an excellent job with the adaptation of the carbon copy of it. No, but it shouldn't have been. So I'm
Mhm.
cool. I'm cool with that.
Exactly, and that's one of the things I've had to, I guess, as a book reader, especially with certain other properties, you have to take that step back and you just have to just enjoy it for, or try
Hmm.
to enjoy it for what it is,
Hmm.
and respect hopefully that the decision's made and go from there, and then judge it like, okay, maybe I don't like the series, but I still have the books, or maybe I like the series better. The books aren't going to change, so
Hmm.
it, it's
Exactly.
it's just something where it seems like everyone's got their thing, or even the people that play the games, and it's like, because I know the games are their
Yeah.
whole separate thing, as like away from the books at times.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yeah. That was a big thing because only knowing partial details of the game lore, I didn't really I didn't really know to compare the books and the games very much at first, and then later on through my friends, I just learned how vast the differences are for
mhm.
a lot of the plots of the game versus the book. So I can only imagine how it was for the gamers to watch the series because that's like 2 degrees of separation at that point. But I think that just like the book readers have to kind of step away from the comparison. I think that once the gamers can step away from the comparison to like this is a solid series. Like this is a very good start, I think.
One of my favorite questions to ask somebody that
Mhm.
loves both a book series and a either movie or TV series is, do you have a favorite character, and are they the same, or are they different based on the property?
Ooh, oh my goodness. Okay, so for The Witcher specifically,
Mhm.
um, I I love Yennefer. in the books. I loved her. She was just like sass queen with heart and motherly and just wonderful. And in the series, I think it just knocked my love up for her even another level. Like I just because we her backstory in the series is an addition to like that most of it wasn't ever laid out or detailed in the books. So but it was kind of hinted at for most of it. So to see that on screen made me love her even more. And then of course Geralt and Ciri, like that is my family trifecta. And so far they are just amazing, amazing in the adaptation. Now Queen Calanthe is somebody who like I paid a little bit of attention to in the books, but not really. But in the series, I mean, a scene stealer. Wow. Jodie May knocked it out of the park with that role. So I think like my core favorites from the book were still my core favorites in the show. But Queen Calanthe was the surprise favorite for me. Like she was the one that I said, "Oh, I swear all fealty to you. Yes, my queen." Absolutely. Yeah. So that was the one wild card dark horse suggestion or adaptation right there because excellent. It was just excellent.
Yeah, she definitely, again with the timelines, like I didn't make the connection from the first episode to when they're in Sintra later on in the series, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, they're the same person.
Yep.
I didn't realize it at the time. I was like, man, she is like one of the most badass characters that I've seen in probably the past couple of years.
Right? And it's funny you mentioned that too, because one of the Easter eggs I was talking about that they laid for the timeline is in a scene where the sorcerers and sorceresses were talking. Syed DeVries, if I'm not mistaken, mentions Princess Calanthe is
Mhm.
in battle, and it's kind of like an offhanded comment. Um, but that was one of the things that kind of cued me in. I was like, oh wait, they just said Princess Calanthe, not Queen Calanthe. She's Queen Calanthe when we first saw her. So I was like, they switched up the timelines. Okay, now I see. So that was one of the Easter eggs was Princess Calanthe versus Queen Calanthe. And I'm like,
Mhm.
wow, this chick was just like awesome from her teenage years. Like, wow.
Yeah, it is it like the show is just not only with the characters, but it's beautifully shot as far as
Hmm.
all the visuals that you're getting. The CGI where they have it that is not distracting.
No.
It's really not. It's not like it just suddenly throws you out. And I mean, even with that first episode where it's like Geralt is fighting or coming out of the water, and the that
Hmm.
one creature is there, and it's like it it's got that look
Yeah.
that they don't need to do a lot with what they're working with, because they play a lot with the darkness or the shadows, and they don't have to overexpose whatever he's going against, but it's just so well done.
Yes. 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 Like the world building was so good in the series too. Like I was like, oh, this is the world that I read about. Now I'm looking at it. So that was I loved it. I say that a lot, but I loved it.
I annoyed my wife because I've been singing like "Toss a coin to your wisher." Like it's my go-to. Like when I'm cleaning or cooking, I'll kind of just sing it a little bit.
Yeah.
And she's like, "What is that?" Because she works on a college campus, and she said that she's been hearing it all over the
Oh
place.
my gosh.
And I said it's from the show that I've watched, and she's like, "Can I watch it?" And I said, "Of course you can, but it's scary in some parts." And so I think we're gonna try to watch it this weekend
Yes.
together. But
Yes.
she's tentatively looking forward to it, I will say. She's not she's got her own things that she's into that are more like not in like my wheelhouse of fandom. So I always try to get her invested in stuff that I enjoy.
That sounds like my mom. I'm like, my mom is, I got her into basically the majority of the things that I'm into, I got her into. They are not in her wheelhouse either, but I put them on TV and I'm like, hey, let me just watch this thing in front of you for 2 hours. Like, I mean, no influence here, but influence absolutely. So that's how I end up like dragging someone else down my fandom rabbit hole.
Exactly. Now, I want to go from The Witcher to something that I'm very embarrassed to say, and I've I'm 40 years old now. I have watched a lot of stuff, and I've watched a lot of anime. Some of it really good, and some of it really bad.
That's anime,
And
yep.
I have to say that this series is one that for whatever reason, I have not sat down to watch it,
Mhm.
and it wounds me because I know how good it is from everyone that I've talked to about it, and that is Cowboy Bebop.
Yes, yes, yes. I love short answer. I love that series. It's my favorite. So it used to come on Adult Swim back when Adult Swim first started,
Mhm.
which is when I was in middle school. Yeah. It's fun times. But yeah, so like around like very early 2000s, it started airing then. And for whatever reason, I'm just a night owl always. I was just watching and I was never so kind of a little bit of backstory. I have epilepsy. So because of that, when Pokemon and Digimon and Yu-Gi-Oh and all of them came out, and they were like the hype shows to watch. They
Mhm.
also had all those stories of like, don't let your kids watch this if they have epilepsy because it's going to make them have seizures. So
Right.
my family took that to heart. I was not allowed to watch anime um, really until I just was left to my own devices, which was in middle school. And so I was like I was like, oh my gosh, am I gonna like break out into a seizure watching this? But I didn't know that Cowboy Bebop fell on a whole different genre of anime. I
Mhm.
didn't know there were different genres of anime at that time, but that fell on a whole different genre of anime. That not only could I safely watch it because most of the scenes were not big flashy battle scenes, but that I could connect to the story on a more like character driven. It's so character driven and it's just beautifully done because like a lot of the episodes are standalone
Mhm.
with a few exceptions. Um, and so kind of like The Witcher with the short stories, like these one-off episodes just allow you to just get into the characters in other situations besides the main plot. And so when main plot lines start coming in, you're in it. And that was Cowboy Bebop for me. And so that was my first true experience with anime. And I remember it's only 26 episodes. And after episode 26, like I just remember going to school that next week. And I didn't really talk about anime very much. I just remember going to school that next week and I was like, I don't I don't know what to do. Like what do I do with myself right now? Like I had like a whole existential crisis at like 12 or 13 after watching that. I was like, this is like that show, I don't know what just happened, but it may have changed my life. What is this? Like and I can't and it's one of those shows where I'm like, I'm probably overhyping it a little bit, but I don't feel like I am. I feel like it was just a really genuinely well done show.
Exactly, and that's what I've heard from so many people is that, like, the hype is real, and that
Yeah.
for it to have gone, what, I think we're, what, 30 years
Yeah. Like
from when it showed on from,
yeah,
oh
it's like we're
gosh,
like a good 20
Cartoon
something.
Network, yeah,
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 we're a good 20 something into it.
so, I mean, I've talked with a number of people about it. They always say it's one of, like, those cornerstone animes that people
Mhm.
need to watch. And in fact, I love, and you may not know it, or you may know it, the TV show Firefly that Joss Whedon did,
Yes,
and people have said Firefly is just Cowboy Bebop
it
but
is.
live action.
It is. It really is. And because Cowboy Bebop, it's it's also Shinichiro Watanabe, and God love me, I probably butchered that. But he creates worlds that aren't just that like incorporate other cultures, other like people, diverse beliefs, like just all over the world. And Cowboy Bebop has a lot of Western influence. So that kind of typical Western feel, but in space, like the kind of grungy and dodgy underworld of a Western society, but in space. It's like the foundation of that series, which is I always got that same sense from Firefly too. So I feel like that's why there's always so many comparisons between the two, because that's just it. The influences for both of them were there from the same place, and it's really cool to see.
I I gotta make time. I saw that it was on Hulu yesterday when I was scrolling through looking for something to watch. I'm gonna have to just do it. Like
Yeah.
I think next week I'm gonna have to watch it. I've said I'm gonna watch it like a number of times, and I never do.
Yeah.
I find myself like rewatching shows that I've seen probably too many times where I need to
Same.
incorporate some new ones, and I've got to watch it. I do have a question though, because I know that there's one of the characters is named Faye Valentine, and
Oh
I
my, I
just
was
have to
hoping you were
ask,
gonna
like,
ask that.
you adopted the Valentine name.
Yep. That's from Faye. That is 1000% Faye Valentine based. 'Cause she is one of my favorite characters in anything. She's so complex, which whenever you get a chance to see it, you'll see like she presents one way, and you think that's just a stereotype for her. It's not. She's so complex. She's so layered, and has way more heart than she wants to ever admit. Like she's actually a lot like Yennefer,
Hmm.
for The Witcher, and which I guess I just have a type. But like she's in that same kind of vein where she's just like presenting this exterior one way, but she's her heart is way less selfish than she wants it to be. It's and she cares a lot about people. She will never admit that, but she cares. So that's why I from when I was yay high, I loved her, and it never let up. So that's why I was just like when a friend of mine helped me come up with my cosplay name, she was like, "What about like will you love Faye?" I was like, "I do love Faye Valentine." So that's how that happened.
Now, you said you were a night owl even back in middle
Oh
school,
yeah,
and
all of my life.
you stayed up and you watched Toonami on
Hmm.
Cartoon Network. What was the appeal to Cowboy Bebop? Was it just something, because I've heard a number of people say different things, character driven story. I've heard people say that the music is what they brought them in. Like,
Hmm.
what was it for you that made a middle school Reina stick around to watch the show?
So to start with, it was on. It was just on TV. It was on a familiar channel that I always watched, and that was literally the basis of me starting it. I was like, this is a thing that's on TV. I then so because I just am odd, but Spike Spiegel, main character, I thought he was drawn kind of hot. I I I don't know. My brain was just like, that's a cute. That is a very attractively drawn character. And so I was like, okay, I guess let me just look at this real quick. That's whatever. I probably won't even follow it. But like, what I think once I started watching, because like when I started it, it had already been a couple of episodes in, um, and I think it was one of those things where I was like, okay, I don't know exactly what happened before, but I'm interested in what happened before. Let me just keep this on my TV, and if I pay attention, I pay attention. But I think what started getting me was the character dynamics, and of course the music. The music is iconic. Yoko Kano is a genius. She does all things right, um, and so like I think what got me into it was the characters, dynamics and then the music, because at that point when I started it, the main plot hadn't really come in much,
Hmm.
and I hadn't seen the tidbits from the first episode of the main plot, so I couldn't get into it plot for plot reasons initially, but I was in it by the time the plot came in. So that, oh god, I just love Cowboy Bebop. It just hit me all over again just then. Oh, that's that Cowboy Bebop feel.
One of the things whenever I watch a series is I wish I could go back and watch that series again, like with fresh eyes. Is that something that you wish you could do? Is like just forget about Cowboy Bebop and then rediscover it like brand new, just so you could just have that sensation all over again of, oh my gosh, this show is amazing.
So that is the beautiful thing about Cowboy Bebop for me, is that I do that all the time. It's one of those fandoms that is always dormant. It's not always active. Like it's rarely my main fandom, and it's just always under the surface, somehow just background noise. But sometimes I'll just remember something about it, and I'm like, oh, I need to rewatch, and then I'll rewatch, and it feels like I'm watching it for the first time because it'll be the first time in like 2-3 years that I've seen
Hmm.
it. And it's because the fandom is so old, really at this point.
Hmm.
It's not I'm not inundated with it all the time, and so it's not always so ever present that I'm tired of seeing it. And so I never get tired of seeing it. It's always fresh for me. Um, and I'll go back to it, and I'll not watch it for years, just knowing that it's awesome, and then I'll go back to it again, and it's just always like that. It's always fresh for me. So I think Cowboy Bebop is probably one of the series that's unique for me in that like it can just pop back up with the same strength that I always had for it every
Hmm.
time.
It's definitely one of the fandoms where I rank it amongst things like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Star Trek. It seems to be it's one of those fandoms of regardless of how much time passes, it's still going to be one of those cornerstone fandoms for people to find and discover and
Hmm.
just really get into.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like it may not be something that the person that someone's actively talking to, like I could be cosplaying from a new anime, and my friend could cosplay from Final Fantasy 15, and my other friend can cosplay from a Tangled series or something like that. Um, but you'll find somebody, you'll like be a whole crowd of cosplayers from different series, and someone will say, "So what about Cowboy Bebop?" And everyone's heads like, "Yes, let's rant about it for 3 hours." Because it's one of those like you said, it's always present, like in the anime community, especially, but even outside the anime community, like a lot of people reference it, they just know it. And so it's one of those, anytime I hear it mentioned, like no matter what fandom I'm into, my head just pops up like a little gopher. I'm like, huh? You said it. You said the magic word. Let's talk. So I get the sense that it's like that for a lot of people too. It's a dormant but prominent fandom.
It's like you guys are all sleeper
Yes,
agents
we are
of
all
Cowboy Bebop.
sleeper agents, and any mention of Cowboy Bebop is the trigger word. That's it. That is the thing that wakes us all up, and we all start playing jazz and flying spaceships.
Oh my goodness. I'm gonna what I'm gonna do is when I start, I'm gonna post about it on Twitter and I'll be sure to tag you and then I'll
Yes,
tag you when I'm done and I'll be like, okay, I finished.
yes. Oh my goodness. I'm not responsible for any high expectations that have been placed on you to enjoy it, but just know I love it. If you
Hmm.
don't love it, that is totally fair and that's totally valid, and I respect that. But I hope you love it. So I hope you at least like it, because
Well,
I've been talking
I
a big game for it.
well, I know I've heard the music from it because I
Mm,
really love like jazz
yeah.
style music and I've heard a number of different pieces, so I already love the music. So
Yes.
we'll go in from there.
Yes. Yes. So if you love the music, then that's like the music is so heavy in the show. Like it's always perfectly timed. It's always like it's not always the same genre, but it all has the same feel. Like it all still belongs together and it all still belongs in the plot. So you'll at least love the music. I'm just like, so nervous when people watch it because I love it so much. But I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. Not everyone's going to love it. But boy, howdy do I do.
Exactly. I do it with my wife all the time when I introduce her to stuff. I'm like, I'm looking over and I'm like, do you like it? Do you
Yeah.
like it?
Yep.
Do you like it now?
It's like you were looking down at that part. Did you hate it? I love that part. That's the best part.
Oh my gosh. She likes to play like her different games on her phone sometimes while she's watching stuff. I'm like, but you missed it. She's like, no, I didn't. I'm like, but I saw you looking down.
Oh my gosh, that's my mom. My mom will leave the room. She'll be on her phone. I'm just like, Mom, you missed the part, the one thing. I'm like, it's never the one thing, but it's just the thing I wanted her to react to.
Yep.
And it's like you didn't do the thing that I wanted you to do. How dare you go get food? Like, why do you need nourishment when Cowboy Bebop's on TV? Like,
why can't you just pause it? Like, come on.
I'm like, you could have at least paused it. I'm like, she's like, I'm paying attention. Be like, oh, I can't. I just cannot. So I've just resorted. I'm never watching anything with her anymore. She stresses me out. I love her to death and back, but she stresses me out when I'm watching things that I love with her. For that reason.
Oh my gosh. Yep. Right there with you. Right there with you. Now, I wanna ask before we jump in. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I feel like I'm always ready for this topic. Even if I'm not ready for this topic, I'm always ready for it.
All right. Well, one of the things that attracted me to you to begin with was your cosplay, and it's a cosplay of a very specific character. And before we started recording, I told you something, and I'm going to try to say it again. I don't know if it's going to come out as eloquently as I said it the first time, but your cosplay of Daenerys Targaryen is one of the most picturesque ones that I have found on the internet. I love looking at you as Daenerys because I love everything about the outfit that you've chosen, but I also love like the way that you carry yourself in those pictures, and it's like it is so spot on that I just love it. And I was like, well, obviously she has to love Game of Thrones, right? And
yep.
And before I'm going to catch you before we
Yep.
jump off the cliff here.
Before we jump shark.
Did you get into Game of Thrones first with the show, or were you into it before with the books?
I first got into it with the show. So again, I swear everything I've ever said in my life has a weird backstory. But so it started off with well, I was in the Hunger Games fandom before Game of Thrones, and those before the movies were cast. And we were doing all these fan casting things on IMDb. We were always talking about like, oh yeah, so and so should play Katniss, and so and so should play blah 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 blah. And I saw a picture, and I cannot remember if it was Maisie Williams or Isaac when he was like really young. Isaac Hempstead, right, when he was really young, and I'm so sorry. I thought he was a girl, but I said I was like, oh, if they were like older, I could see them playing. It was Isaac because it was a scene in the first series when he had a bow and arrow and he was standing with Jon, and there was a picture at that point because the show itself hadn't come out, but the stills had.
Right.
And so I saw the picture. I was like, well, she will make a great Katniss. And I said, oh, Isaac, I am so sorry. You would not probably make the best Katniss, but who is that next to you? And that was Kit Harington.
Right.
Jon Snow. So I was like, oh, he's very pretty. I'll keep that on my radar because there was no info on him online at that time. But that was how I kind of started doing initial research of Game of Thrones and kind of piqued my interest a little bit. And that's also in my vein of things that I would like anyway. And so I didn't have HBO at the time. I didn't have anyone I could watch it with, so I kind of forgot about it for like when it first started airing. Um, and then I was in a hotel and I suddenly remembered. I was like, oh, that pretty guy was in that show on HBO. This hotel has HBO. Let me see if that Game of Thrones show is on. And it was. And it was episode 7, I believe, of the first season. And I was watching it and I was like, oh, I'm in this. And after that, I said, okay, I binged the whole first season. And I said, hold up, this show's amazing. Wait a minute. I must know all the things, because that's how I fandom. Like, I get started on something and then I just go head first into concrete of the concrete is the fandom. And I just research everything about it. And so I said, oh, they're based on books. So let me take the time in between season 1 and season 2 and let me read these books, because now I'm into it. And then I saw them at Comic-Con that year too, in 2011. And I was like, I love these actors. They are such sweethearts. And then, I knew Lena Headey and Sean Bean from before, but I was like, they're such sweethearts. I'm like, I love this cast. So let me dive into these books. And I straight up devoured the books. So I got into it with the first season, but then I read all the books by the time the second season came out. And I feel like A Dance with Dragons, the most recent one, was out by then too. So I either read up through the next to last one and then read the last one later, or I read all of them by season 2. And we actually bought HBO for season 2. So that was my beginning getting into. I'm noticing a pattern. Like I see pretty guys, and I'm like, now I'm interested in this series. Whether they're animated or human, I'm like, oh, now I'm in it. Who's that? So I'm like, okay, well, I have, again, there's my standards. But that's what got me into the show initially. But I was heavy, deep encyclopedic knowledge of Game of Thrones for a long time.
I got into it almost the same way, except for the pretty guy aspect. Is that somebody had suggested Game of Thrones, like it had just started. So I started with the first season. And then I was going around. I was like, "Oh yeah, you should watch this new series, Game of Thrones." And one of my friends was like, that's a book series, right?" I was like, "What?" And I had the I can read moment.
Yes.
And luckily he had all the books. So again, did the same thing you did, read them all before the second season started, and just kept on watching.
Yep.
And but before I want to get a few more questions. Want to get a few more questions in. And again, it's kind of like with The Witcher. Did your favorite characters change between book and TV series? Like, do you have a favorite book character versus like a favorite TV character, or are they the same? Like, what characters do you got?
So my favorite characters, like just the most standard, are Daenerys, Jon, Arya are probably like my top 3. They, and in the books, their personalities, largely, I would say, even more so than Daenerys in book versus show. Jon in book versus show is very different beast, literally. And so while all 3 of them were my favorites in both the TV show and the series, the book series, I think that like it stayed the same, and I didn't really have that Queen Calanthe moment where I gained faves from the show that I didn't have in the books. But it was one of those, like, I see them, the 3 of them, as separate entities, both in the show versus in the books. So I have the same faves, I just like them in different ways.
Right.
In show versus book, I would say.
That's totally respectable, especially with Game of Thrones. I feel like, and it's one of the things that I know that I'm going to have a hard time because it's been so long since I've read the book series
Hmm.
that if and when the next book comes out, I'm going to have to reread them all to even,
Yeah.
remember the book storyline versus the TV series
Yeah.
storyline.
Yeah.
Like my favorites in the TV series, I love Tyrion, but I also love
Hmm.
Peter Dinklage. Like I've loved him since I first saw him in a different
Yeah.
TV series, and I like watching him. I love Samwell,
Hmm.
but apparently I have a thing for characters named Sam because like Lord of the
I
Rings
like
is
Lord of the
Sam
Rings. Yep.
and Game of Thrones Sam.
Yep.
So it's like that character type is that helper sidekick character. Yeah, I'm there for them.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I do. I will say I loved Tyrion in the show so much, more than in the books so much. Like
Hmm.
I don't hate him in the books really. He's just another very different character in the books.
Exactly.
So, but I loved him so much more in the show to start. So yeah.
Hmm. All right, we're gonna do it now. I'm pulling the
Oh, we're
Band-Aid
doing
off.
it. Oh man,
Okay.
that is one stuck on Band-Aid.
Game of Thrones was a great series, and it became a very divisive series once
Yes.
we passed a certain point where there was no more books.
Yep.
And the rumor on the street, and I don't I swear there are times where I hear interviews, I'm like, okay, I totally get it, and I hear interviews where I'm not getting it. The rumor was George R. R. Martin told them basically like some of the beats for the characters, and here's the ending. And then the series became what it was. A lot of things that we had read in the books that should have been included didn't, or got excised or changed,
Mhm.
and it became something where it was something where, and I hate to say it because it's such a divisive thing. I know that a lot of the fandom didn't like it.
Mhm.
Some fandom did like it. What what are your thoughts?
Oh man. I really do think that one of these days I'm going, because I have a bachelor's of communications in media studies, and basically the majority of my degree was it was writing scholarly articles on pop culture things. I really do feel that degree scratching in to write my feelings on Game of Thrones, because I fell on the um to say negative side of it doesn't quite say it enough.
Mhm.
I don't buy, just based on the books versus the story that we saw in the final season. Um the final season was just, it was piecemeal together. It was just, it was it wasn't cohesive from the start, but I gave it a little bit of a, it's okay, it's Game of Thrones, it'll recover. Um I gave it the benefit of the doubt, but there are some storylines that even in two books, they don't line up with what the ending we saw was. Um, there are there are characters who, their behavior, their judgment, their past, their actions, like they were based on things that didn't happen, even within the span of the story that we have of the books.
Mhm.
And that led them to their finales in season 8. And I'm like, I don't know how you can get there. Even with two books, to flesh that out would have to retcon what has already been presented and true foreshadowing in the book. And because of that, I don't buy that. I buy that they had broad strokes, like they said, and I do think that they had broad strokes. I don't necessarily have the most faith in George to not have a similar ending, um, but I don't think that we saw the ending that the book's gonna have. I really don't, because the way the books are set up, there are too many missing characters from in the series that are quite important in the books. Definitely felt like season 8 was just like they went on Game of Thrones Reddit and just picked the top hot topics and then made episodes out of them. Like, it didn't feel like, it really genuinely did not feel like there was that much thought put into it, to say that they'd known since season 3 or whenever they said that they knew it from. I'm like, that they knew the characters' endings from. I'm like, I don't know that I buy that, guys. That sounds like you might be, covering your tracks a little bit there. So I fall on the, man, I'm gonna live my life pretending that season 8 never happened. 'Cause wow, that was a mess. That was a mess.
The thing about podcasts is that you can't see, like, I'm nodding along because there's definitely agreement, especially with certain characters and how the characters for 7 seasons
Yeah.
had been going along, and then on the 8th season there was definitely they're not acting the way that they should be.
No.
Why are they, like, either going along with whatever the story is or
Mhm.
doing this or doing, like, it didn't make sense on a number
No.
of times where I'm like, that's like, and I get it. Like, the show's not going to line up with what's in my head, and the show's not
Mhm.
going to line up with what's in your head. But what they had presented, there are those arcs where the majority of people are going to be saying, wait a second, like,
Yes.
how, why, like, it was a constant questioning. Like, it felt like every 10 to 15 minutes a character would do something, and my reaction was, what, why,
Yes.
like, why are you doing that?
Like how you just said I couldn't see you nodding on the podcast. You did not just see the like fist pumps I did in the air at that. Like, I co-sign all of that. Like, there were things that didn't make sense. Like, so I'm like thoroughly Team Targaryen. Like, I love the Targaryens. I love them, and because I read Fire and Blood, which is I highly recommend to anybody. Those are fantastic side story. But I've also always loved the Starks. They were not behaving the way that they would normally behave in season 8. I don't know what went horribly wrong, but like, you have characters like Arya, who Visenya Targaryen, one of the original conquerors, like, she's one of her idols. So here comes this woman who's got, like, the approval sign off of her favorite sibling and John, and she's coming up there with dragons, and she's a warrior queen type, like, not doing anything crazy at that point to make you wary of her. And so I don't know why Arya Stark, as we know her, would have sided against her. Sansa Stark, who I think was one of the most butchered characters of the series, in book versus show. I can understand her initial wariness. Like, that totally made sense. And I was totally expecting that. I was not expecting it to continue past episode 3. And that seemed horribly out of character for her. And Bran, I don't know what Bran was doing. I don't know. Like, I feel like they didn't know what Bran was doing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so I feel like those 3 characters specifically felt like, I don't know who you are. I have never seen you guys in my life, to the point where I say, like, anytime I talk about them online, I'm always very, very in tune of calling them. I say, like, this was not Sansa, this was Sandra. This was not Arya, it was Andrea. I'm like, because I don't see them as the characters that I knew them as, and I don't acknowledge them as the characters that I knew them as, because season 8 they were butchered also. And my boy John, oh, sweetheart, just Jim Rain is what I call season 8 John, because that was not my boy. I love my boy too much to say that was my boy, and just stuff like that. Just really made me feel like this was not planned. This was not properly planned. This was just kind of things that they wanted to happen to subvert expectations, and it didn't work. It didn't work because the narratives they'd already presented, whether it was XYZ or ABC, like they did not end properly with that finale. Like they didn't lead there properly. And so that's why I felt was like, okay, I can't even subscribe to this season. It makes no sense. Hard as I would have tried to make sense.
Exactly. Like I think there's a couple that are always glaring to me whenever I think about it and look back. Like Arya and her time training to be one
Oh,
of like the world's greatest assassins, and then it kind of is shelved.
yes.
Or you have oh gosh, I'm trying to think of it. Like Jamie and Brienne's storyline,
Oh my
and then it's
goodness.
like, okay, Jamie's going back. Okay.
Yes.
And then like and one of the things, and I've talked about it with somebody previously, I said, I think if they knew that they were going into the final season, they knew it going in from season 7.
Mm-hmm.
I think they either misplanned or misjudged what they wanted to do. I really feel they could have probably needed like an extra 2 episodes to kind of like extend it, not cram everything in,
God,
get some of those
yes.
character beats and get the story where they need it to go.
Yeah.
But
And
it's definitely something where they're like, okay, well, we have to have this final battle. Like that was the thing, is that you have the battle on Winterfell.
mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know I know you got it, but then you gotta wrap up the whole like the whole storyline with all these like 30 characters, and you just cannot do that.
You can't. You can't. I'm like, that's why I'm not a nihilist by any means, but I was fully prepared for way more people to die in the Battle of
Oh my
Winterfell.
gosh,
If it was going to be
yes. Oh
episode
my
3,
gosh.
I was just like, okay, well, obviously it's going to be huge casualties because otherwise they have all these characters they have to do something with in the last 3 episodes, and there's no possible way you can properly tie up everyone's storyline if you don't kill a large chunk of them in episode 3. But they didn't. And so I'm like, so now you have all these, like, you have characters that just disappear, like Davos, disappear for a while, and he popped up, and then he disappeared, and then he popped up again in King's Landing to look sad or something, and then he disappeared again, and then he's on. It's just like, it's like you have like a lot of plot lines and stuff that the Battle of Winterfell, if you're gonna have it that early on, should have killed off some of the spares, but
Oh
they didn't.
yeah. Yeah, because like if you're looking at everything that's on the page, there's too many characters,
Mm-hmm.
and they built it up to how they presented it is, how are these characters surviving that type of overwhelming odds? Like
Yes.
it is unfathomable to
Yes.
have that many characters be like alive.
We're
Now,
good.
did I shed a tear when my girl from Bear Island,
Lyanna Mormont. Yes.
like the probably one of my favorite characters in that series,
Same.
I was like, oh man, she went out, but she went out awesome. And you knew that people were going to die, but there was not enough.
Yeah, I'm like, the stakes felt way higher than they ended up being. And it was one of those things where it was just like, okay, so like, because in the books it lays out like the others are always that kind of like underbelly threat. And the Game of Thrones itself, like Cersei and the political aspect of it, like
Hmm.
that's a surface level problem. And through John's story specifically and Bran's story, you see that the real problem is it's the others. And so I feel like in the show, because to the showrunners, to their admission, they don't really like the fantasy aspect. They don't like
Oh my
fantasy,
gosh,
which I
that
thought was
blew me
wildly.
away.
It was like I was like, I could fly off into the sun right now. I'm so angry at that. But like they didn't like the fantasy aspect of it. And so they made the final big bad the political side of it. And I don't think that's the case. I think that it showed with the Battle of Winterfell being as underwhelming as it was. The end of the Night King, the the White Walkers, the others, all that was so underwhelming. And it really felt like it's because they don't appreciate the fantasy aspect of the series. They wanted to just get that off the way so they can get back to fighting over this chair, and that's it. And that's, I think, was one of their largest downfalls, was not realizing, okay, I think that these others will be a little bit harder to get through, and more characters would not be able to get through them.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I started getting out of it. I said, something's going wrong here, but let me just smile and nod because I love Game of Thrones so much. But that was the beginning of the end for me.
I want to wrap it up with a question on, obviously Game of Thrones for HBO did incredibly well, minus, the last season with fan expectations and vocal
Execution.
outrage. They had a number of different possible spin-offs that they're going to do. They greenlit one. They canceled the female directed showrun main character female one. When this eventual show does come out, will you return to Westeros and give it a chance to watch it, or are you like kind of, are you going to need some time away from Game of Thrones?
So what happened with the Long Night prequel that they initially planned with Naomi Watts? I was out of that. There was no way I was going to watch that whatsoever. I was just so massively uninterested in it, especially after the underwhelming ending. But these HBO, they did say the magic word, and that's Targaryens for me. And the Targaryens are just like the most interesting family. And like they have the most interesting history that encompasses as many families and characters. And that I think it could be successful. I don't like that it seems like they're only focusing on the Dance with the Dragons, or the Dance with the Dragons, which was their civil war that was almost the beginning of the end for them. And I don't like they're focusing on that because it seems like it's playing more into that whole, the Targaryens are all bad and they're all crazy. Mind you, for the podcast listeners, there were only about 5 or 6 Targaryens in the 300-year history that were considered mad, but they actually weren't mad from birth. Circumstances made them mad. And they weren't unhinged. They were just cruel. But for the most part, they were a pretty normal, sane family. But I feel like why I'm on the fence about whether or not I'll watch it is because them choosing to focus on one of the worst parts of Targaryen history, as opposed to like focusing on Aegon and his sisters, the Conquerors, that was greatness, and Jaehaerys and Alysanne was greatness. Instead of focusing on those kind of eras, which are so interesting, they're very interesting, wonderful eras to focus on, they focused on the negative era of the Targaryens. And so that's what's giving me pause to be into it, because as it's going to be a mind-blowing, if they do it well, it's going to be mind-blowing. It's going to be amazing to see on screen. But it feels like they're just going to be injecting more of that bad, evil Targaryens, or wild, crazy Targaryens who can't handle the throne thing. And after what they did to Daenerys, I'm like, I'm so over it. I am so over this ridiculous narrative that's not even true, not for Daenerys, not for the majority of the Targaryens. So I'm on the fence. I'll have to see so much more of it, and especially since some of the people who worked on Game of Thrones itself are going to be coming back and working on that. So I'm working on House of the Dragon. So I'm wary at this point. So I'll see how I feel closer to, which I guess is going to be 2022 is when it's going to be premiering. I'll see how I feel closer to there, but I'm in the whole mode of like, this feels like probably not going to be my favorite cup of tea with this world, which is very sad because again, I love Fire and Blood and I love House Targaryen, but I think they're just gonna pander that mad Targaryen mess again, and I'm not here for that. So we'll see.
Exactly, exactly. It's gonna definitely be one of those, "All right, I like, maybe I'll give it a chance.
Hmm.
Maybe I'll wait on it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll, wait until the first season's completed its run and then go in from there."
Yeah, I think now I will say if they do bring back the idea of an old Valeria prequel, which they've been playing around with for a while, if they do ever bring back that idea, I would be interested in that because that's really interesting history too. So I there are things that could get me back into Westeros and Essos and Planetos and all of them, but it's they have a lot of bridges to rebuild with me after season 8.
Mhm.
A whole bunch. So,
Yeah, it's definitely something where the fandom was in such a there like the fandom was so
oh,
good for the most part, and then it just, man, it's like they took a hammer to it and just
they did.
cracked it,
Oh,
and
and they pandered to all the worst voices they could ever pander to, and so now the fights online are just in insurmountable. And so I think that's why I've dived so deeply into The Witcher too, like not as a replacement because I don't want to ever put The Witcher as like it's the new Game of Thrones because I hate when people do that. It's
oh
not.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
not the new Game of Thrones. It's The Witcher. But what I love about that is that it gives me a whole other world to chew on, and
Mhm.
I'm now having learned my lesson from Game of Thrones. I'm staying more. I'm in the fandom, but I'm more on the outskirts in the general populace of the fandom, rather than rather than spending 8 years on message boards and group chats and all the stuff about the series. Like, I'm keeping my fandom circle tight, and so I feel like if for some reason down the way you start getting into heavy fights with the Witcher series, I will still be able to just say, I'm not in it. I don't know those guys. So I'm just going to enjoy the series and the books as they are, which is something that I learned from the downfall of Game of Thrones. So if nothing else, it helped me approach fandom better. So thank you for that,
Absolutely.
D&D and HBO at all. At least you did that for me.
Now, one of the things that I mentioned before we started talking
Mhm.
specifically about Game of Thrones is that I had found, I'm pretty sure I had either seen a picture of your Daenerys cosplay or somebody had retweeted it, something of that nature, and I clicked follow, and the rest was history.
Yeah.
You are an amazing cosplayer. You
Thank
have
you.
wonderful characters, not only Daenerys, but you have Tiana.
Oh,
You have one of the muses from Hercules, which is
yes.
totally underrepresented, and I love
Yes.
when I get to see them. Um, how did you first find your way into doing cosplay?
Oh man. Oh, so fun. Like I started off just like looking online. I always say I had like a fandom renaissance in 2009. I just started like a new college. I was like 21, so I said, you know what? I'm just gonna let me just like again dipping back into back into Cowboy Bebop is how I got into that fandom renaissance again. And by that time, people were posting cosplays and stuff online, and I was like, oh my gosh, that person. I thought they were actors. I was like, that person's like they have a really great costume for Faye Valentine. Um, and then I realized like, wait, these are just regular people. Like, what is this? Who is this? So I just kind of got into it that way. And I tell the story all the time. My friends are gonna kill me because I always say it, but like I made my first cosplay for Anime Week in Atlanta in 2009. Was Yumi Komagata from Rurouni Kenshin anime, and I made it out of a bed sheet from Walmart. It's a kimono. I made it out of a bed sheet from Walmart the night before the con in my dorm. So that was my first cosplay experience. But I went to AWA and I was like, this this is the exact world I want to be around. Like these people are dressed up like these characters that they love and I love. Um, and we're just taking pictures like we're celebrities or something, but we're just here because we're huge nerds, and this is great. So that's kind of how I got started in it, was falling down a rabbit hole of what's that, and then leading into bedsheet kimonos, which led eventually down to Daenerys.
I want to go over a few of them just to shout them out because I'm on
Yeah,
your Instagram page now,
cool.
and you did Faye Valentine,
Yes.
which I was like, okay, cool. You did one of the Schuler sisters from Hamilton.
Oh, my girl, Angelica.
You did Allura from the new Voltron. Love it.
Thank
You
you.
got Honey Lemon, which oh my gosh, I wish one of the things that I wish in the movie is that you got to get to know more about
Yes.
some of those characters. Honey Lemon, I feel like there's so much that I want to know about her.
Same here. Yeah, I'm like, I feel like that was one of the situations where the fandom just kind of created backstories for everyone, and I was like, sold. I'm in that. Like, let's create all these backstories. I don't remember what they were, but I just remember I liked them. But like Honey Lemon was one of the ones I was like, I would absolutely love to hear all the things about her. She's so fun.
You did Joyce Byers,
Mm-hmm.
also great.
Mm-hmm.
Esmeralda, one of the severely underrepresented characters in Disney fandom.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
and then you got let's see here. You got Faye Valentine. I already said that. You got yeah, and then you've got Kira from Star Wars from Han
Yes,
Solo.
yes.
Oh my goodness. Wait a second. Wait a second. You did Anastasia in
I
that
did.
beautiful ball gown dress.
I did. I love Anastasia so much, and I wanted. That was one of those cosplays, like kind of similar to Kira, where I really wanted that dress. And like, I want it. I'm going to make that and cosplay it. And I did. And so full disclosure here, I am not the best seamstress. I can rig things to look like they're sewn decently. They're not. That dress in particular, I sewed, I don't know how, it was such a simple pattern, and I just messed it up so wildly that I have to completely scrap it and redo it again one of these days. But I was only able to wear it once because I then broke it. So,
Mhm.
but like while I wore it, I loved it so much.
And then one that I have to just shout out because I know that I have a lot of friends that love the series is you did Jane from Daria. That's
Yes,
awesome.
yes, yeah. My friend and I, like, we were cosplaying. She actually is the one that came up with it. My Daria and that Blair, and she was just like, what, like, kind of just came up with the idea to do Daria and Jane. I said, yes, sold. That is, you don't have to convince me more than a half a second. I'm already there. So that was really cool and a really comfortable one too. So I gotta bring Jane back again.
Now, I went over like a number of different characters, and some of them are wildly different. They don't really like have connections. How do you choose who you're going to cosplay? Because I know some people go off costumes. A lot of people go off like connections to the characters. So
Hmm.
how do you go from there
Yeah,
to choose who you're going to do?
that's me. I have to. So a big thing for me with cosplay, I always say, I'm like, I'm far more interested in the play side of cosplay than the cost side. So I have to be able to connect with the character. I can't cosplay a character that I don't have a connection or a passion for. And in the past I had done some that I didn't quite connect. I just did it and it showed. Which is why those photos aren't on my Instagram. But like it's so important to me to feel a connection to the character because it makes me want to that makes those, sleepless hours that you're con crunching for these characters. It makes it worth it because you love them. You're like, yeah, I'm, I poked my finger with this pen, but man, Faye Valentine's gonna look amazing. Or I
Mhm.
burned my hand making making Daenerys, which I did a couple of times. And I was like, but Danny's gonna knock it out the park. Let me tell you. And it makes it worth it when you're wearing it too, because you're having fun in it, and then people see you having fun in it, and when you take pictures, like you're into the character. So they're all different characters, like they're all like different spectrums of characters, but like I have a connection to some level with all of them, and that's how I pick the characters. Like even to the point where sometimes I'm just like, oh no, not that one. I don't want to make that. It's so hard. It's hot. like like with Daenerys, for example, I didn't want to cosplay her earlier season ones. Just 'cause I didn't really like. I love the costumes, but I didn't really connect with the costumes as much. It
Right.
wasn't until season 7 that I decided, living in 900-degree hot Atlanta. Oh, I can't remember myself hot Atlanta, but yeah, but like 9,000 degrees at Dragon Con, I decided, aha, that's when I'm gonna cosplay Daenerys in season 7 because I have good ideas. But that was the costume that really spoke to me.
Hmm.
That I wanted to fight, and it's gonna happen again with Yennefer at Dragon Con this year. And I'm like, man, did I not want to make a long sleeve black dress to wear for Dragon Con because I'm tired of the heat exhaustion, but she keeps calling to me, and I gotta do it. So that's it. They call to me, and then I'm like, oh no, as I'm sewing and cutting out the patterns. But it works out in the end. I love every character that I've ever cosplayed. So
That is one of the things that I don't know how people do it, because I live in Orlando,
oh my
and
god.
it is like our big convention, MegaCon, this year's in April instead of May. But I'm still amazed.
Oh,
People are waiting in line outside to get into the convention center
uh,
in their costumes. I do not understand how people survive.
I don't
I
either.
don't.
I don't either. Like
I
it's why, like, first of all, Florida cons, I specifically sworn them off because I have such an affinity for costumes that aren't warm weather friendly, that if I went to a Florida con, like I'm dying in Atlanta. If I went to a Florida con, like I would get maybe to the registration line before I have to go to the hospital. Like I don't like heat anyway, so I don't know how people do that in armor and like fur and everything. I'm like, oh, you're wild. You're all wild, and bless you, but you're wild.
it is absolutely crazy.
Mm-mm.
Now, how do you find the cosplay community? Because I know I've talked with people in a wide range of different states, and I know from experience of talking to them, like certain communities are better received for
Mhm.
just. I've heard the Texas community is very like everyone knows each other, even if like the cons are 9 hours away and you're still in Texas because
Mhm.
Texas is just
Yep.
that way.
You're like, you just reached Dallas to Houston at that point.
How's your experience with the cosplay community?
It's one of those things where it's another thing that I've learned to keep my circle tight with. I and you see, I don't have a whole ton of followers on Instagram, and I'm kind of okay with that. Just because
Hmm.
it helps me just enjoy cosplay for cosplay, because there's so much negative side. There's a whole negative, seedy underbelly to cosplay community that half the time it's not even like cosplayers who are causing the issues. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's people on the outside looking in, and it's so hectic and stressful. Um, and so for example, one reason why it really does mean the world to me that my Daenerys is like the thing that got your attention from me. That means everything to me, because I was actually specifically told multiple times that I shouldn't cosplay Daenerys because I'm black. And because of that like that it hurt for a little bit, but it also made me really just like step back and said, oh, so you say I shouldn't cosplay her because I don't look like her and I don't match her race. What I hear is I'm not going to cosplay Daenerys for the rest of my existence just to piss you off, and I'm just going to keep doing that. But because I feel like because I'm on the outskirts so much of, I keep myself on the outskirts of the fandom of the cosplay community so much.
Mhm.
I feel like I see from the outside how toxic it can get. It just rarely gets as far as me, aside from a couple of racial comments. Um,
Mhm.
but I typically I see some of the sexual comments. I see the gender comments, the other race comments. Like I see how ugly it can get from what my friends have to deal with. Um,
Mhm.
my experience, because my circle's so small, like I've got my buddies in it. Landheart cosplay, um, like Sailor Geek cosplay. Like they're two of my best friends, and because of that, like they invite good people around them, and I only interact with them. So I have a nice little happy bubble going on, which is why I'm still able to enjoy cosplay, because there's a whole big like movement going on right now where a lot of people are just over it. Because it's
Mhm.
just gotten so ugly at some points. And I at that point I'm just like, it's time to shrink your circle then, because it's gonna keep getting ugly, unfortunately, and you're only gonna enjoy it at all if you're able to return to the heart of it, which are your friends and your interests, um, and kind of best as you can tune out the outside and report and block people who need to be reported and blocked, but like just always return back to your home base of your friends with this stuff. Otherwise, cosplay won't be worth it anymore, and it's still worth it for me.
Mhm.
So that's my experience, at least.
Yeah, it's and I speak, and if people don't know what I look like, I am your typical like 40-year-old white dad. Um I straight up admit, like, there are things that I don't comprehend at times,
Hmm.
but when it comes to cosplay, one of my first guests, his name is Trent. And Trent, if I don't know if you're listening, but I'm going to talk about you because you talked about it in one of his episode. Um, he cosplays two primary characters. One is Batman,
Hmm.
and one is the Red Power Ranger. And he always told, like, when we were talking, he had mentioned, when people see him as Batman, of course they just, instead of calling him Batman, he would get those racial connotations of,
Yep.
you're not Batman, you're, you know the other thing.
Yep. Yep.
And I don't want to say it because
No,
I
I know.
really
Yeah.
hate, but the one thing that really shocked me, and he told me on his episode, was he's cosplaying as the Red Ranger. You can't see him.
Hmm.
They're perfectly fine. No one has problems with it until he took his helmet off, and then they're like, "Oh,"
Oh, that's so
and because
sad.
he's cosplaying as like the original Red Ranger.
Hmm.
Well, the original Red Ranger is white,
Hmm.
and then like he's taking off his helmet, and they're taken aback by it. It's like
Yeah.
it's a fictional character.
Exactly. I'm like, it's fictional. They're not real. Like it's so wild. Like I remember when I first cosplayed Faye, I always got black, so they would always call me Blade Valentine, as in Black Faye
Uh
Valentine.
huh.
And I'm like, and at the time I didn't think much on it, but I'm like, in retrospect, I'm like, you know what? I was just cosplaying Faye. I don't ever want to erase the black aspect of it, because that's also very important, that
Hmm.
I am acknowledged as a black cosplayer specifically, but I don't want that to be like the sole basis of your acknowledging my costume. Like you come up to me because you're a fan of Cowboy Bebop, of Game of Thrones, of Daenerys, of that kind of thing. Like I want that to be, I want the black side of it to be oh, that's awesome kind of thing, not a, oh well, like for example, there was a great shot of me and some other black cosplayers um at the Game of Thrones shoot at Dragon Con. And it was an amazing shot. I loved it. But someone was like, this was like if Game of Thrones was on BET.
Oh
And
my gosh.
I'm like, no, this is literally a group of people who came together and cosplayed fictional characters and took a picture. That's what it is. Like it's not like the acknowledge that we're all black, but don't acknowledge it in an offensive way like that.
Right.
And that's one of the ugly sides of that. You're like, listen, I'm cosplaying Daenerys, not Daenerys Blargarian. Like it's like I'm cosplaying Daenerys, and I want people to see her and see the black cosplayer cosplaying her, but not in a way that is like, well, you shouldn't cosplay her because you're not white, you're not fair skinned, you're not blonde, blah 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 blah. I'm like, that kind of stuff just again keeps my circle small. But
Right.
overwhelmingly, I have gotten a lot more people who are like, yes, that's thank you for cosplaying her. So that's always nice to see. But it's always just so frustrating to see the other side of it,
Hmm.
like that
It
situation.
absolutely is. It's it's on a level of like, number one, they're fictional characters.
Hmm.
Number two, if you're cosplaying somebody from anime, you're already doing it differently because
Exactly.
regardless of, almost like 99% of the characters are Asian, regardless
Hmm.
of how they are, their hair color is, or
Hmm.
what. It's just, it it blows my mind, and it really, like, it upsets me to the point where I actively will go through people's things and just like report,
Thank
like
you.
on
Thank you for
Instagram or on
that.
Twitter, and I'm like, okay, report and then block and then move on.
Hmm.
It's one of the things where I love, and I hate, okay, I love that there's like the hashtag, like the for like black cosplayer or
Hmm.
black cosplayer here, but I hate that it has to even be in
Yes.
existence to begin with.
Yes. Yes. It's one of those things where you're like, I'm so glad that we're here at that positive aspect of it. But I hate that had to happen, that black cosplayers had to be so overlooked and so disrespected a lot of times, that we had to make a cosplay hashtag celebrating us because there was not enough celebration behind these things we spend so long on, so much time, so much money for a lot of people. Like I'm on the cheap side,
Mhm.
but like a lot of cosplayers just spend like a ton of money only to be only just to just have someone say, well, the Red Ranger's not black or
Mhm.
Daenerys isn't black. I'm like, well, heck, why did I spend a good 2 months sewing this stuff, learning how to sew so I could sew this stuff if that was all you're gonna see? Like that kind of thing, you're just like, dude, I spent way more time on this than to just have someone come up to me and har in my face. And it's that aspect is so annoying. But like it's nice. It's nice that the trends or that the hashtags exist. But
Mhm.
yeah, just the reason that they had to exist is still so sad.
Yeah, it's definitely something, and it's in a lot of the communities now, and where it's just like, man, can't we can't we just enjoy what we enjoy and stop breaking things down to where it is? And I know, and we talked about The Witcher,
Hmm.
and I'm just going to
Oh
bring it
my
back
goodness,
up, is
yeah.
that one of the things that I loved about The Witcher is that it didn't matter. Like, it didn't matter. The
Hmm.
characters were the characters, and it didn't matter who was playing them.
Exactly.
They were who they were, and I know that I've read a lot of like different articles about, like, this is one of probably the best fantasy worlds
Hmm.
of having just different body types, different skin color.
Hmm.
Like, it's just, and they're there. It's not. It just makes sense because that's how life should be.
Exactly, exactly. I'm like, it's not this the world of The Witcher. It's based on the continent is the name of the world. It's the continents. Like you got elves, you've got dragons, you've got vampires, and all this stuff. I'm like, you can have all of that, but you can't have a brown person. Like that just doesn't make sense. I'm like, they're coloring this world in the way that makes sense. And that was a whole big hoopla online too, especially like with Yennefer's casting.
Oh,
Um,
I loved her
oh my
casting.
goodness. Anya just knocked it out the park. She really did. Like she embodied Yennefer in a way that I would have never even put those expectations on an actress to embody her the way that she did. And I'm like, you guys are sitting there saying that people online are saying that like she shouldn't have been cast. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how you could possibly look at her and say she shouldn't have been cast because she really took that whole role and just ate it. She ran with it. And it was amazing casting. And the world looked beautiful because it had all these different colors and different representations of people and like you said, body types. Just everything was as vibrant and diverse as it should be in a world that exists where you've got 100-year-old sorceresses and
Hmm.
85-year-old witchers who go kill cursed princesses who look like monsters. Like it's not supposed to look like XYZ. Like it's supposed to look like the diverse world that like whatever if XYZ in your head wasn't diverse, you weren't reading the series right. Is the
Right.
way I see it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the last item that I always like to ask people who cosplay, and everyone always has an answer because this is how cosplayers tend to work, is what is on the horizon for you beyond your Yennefer cosplay? Like what do you have your eyes on for what you'd like to do next?
Okay, so I'm doing my original Daenerys design, which is that's my big project right now. It's my first original design too, and the premise of it is the fandom theory that Daenerys was taken to Kinvara, who was a Red Priestess from a few seasons ago, who was a champion for Daenerys, like Melisandre was for Jon. And
Hmm.
she was popped in for one scene and then disappeared. And she's in Volantis. And so the whole theory is Drogon was said to be taking Daenerys' body to Volantis. And they're saying that Daenerys he could take her to Kinvara and she could come back, or she could get brought back to life by her, like Jon was by
Hmm.
Melisandre. So the idea with my cosplay is this is resurrected, ready for war, pissed off Dany, and it's like it's got armor build, which I've never done before. So this is fun to learn and destroy things in the learning process. But like I'm making my own pattern for stuff, which I've never done either. So this is a whole huge learning thing that I'm working on. That's probably my most immediate one. But if I do it well, it's gonna look super cool. And I'm hoping to have it by I will have it by DragonCon. Other than that, I've got like 2 Yennefer cosplays lined up. I'm cosplaying. There's a musical about King Henry VIII's wives.
I just heard about that from a different guest yesterday.
Yes. I am cosplaying Catherine Howard, the second wife who was beheaded, and the 5th wife in the line. But I'm cosplaying Catherine Howard, and I'm super excited about that because I love that. I love that musical so much. And I'm going to be wearing that at DragonCon, which means it will be warm weather friendly, which I never wear warm weather friendly anything. So this is going to be amazing. I'm so looking forward to being able to breathe for 5 minutes in a cosplay at DragonCon. It's a wild concept. I've never heard of it before. So those are I think my main 3 are new Daenerys, which will honestly be my last Game of Thrones cosplay. So that's why I'm going out with a big bang on that. And then Yennefer, 2 versions of Yennefer, and Catherine Howard from Six the Musical. So that's my lineup for 2020 so far, until I watch another thing and another character speaks to me and says, cosplay me. And I'm like, no. And it's like, yes. And I say, okay. So we'll see how that, well, this is bound to get, this list is bound to get a lot longer. So we will check back in with me by Dragon Con. I'll probably have 5 more added.
I'm always amazed. It always amazes me when I see people put out their lineups. And again, I'm not a cosplayer, but it always amazes me. Like they're like, okay, Thursday AM, Thursday PM,
Oh,
Friday AM PM. Saturday, like I can't imagine changing
uh-uh.
into a different one and then going back out. Like it blows me away.
It's so like, I always say, like, I probably will rarely cosplay. My cosplay lineup's usually 3 to 5 a weekend, like 5 for the longer cons. But I realize with age too, I'm so over. I can't do the AM PM thing anymore. I'm like, listen, I need nap time. I hate doing my makeup. I love wearing makeup. I hate doing it. And so I'm like, I sweat off my makeup and I just feel disgusting. And I'm like, by one cosplay in, I'm already like, I'm done. It's nap time. And you're getting the same exact sweaty, gross cosplay in the PM too. Because I'm just not going to. So now I've learned to plan basically 3 cosplays or just 1 cosplay a day, unless it's a really simple cosplay. Like my Muse's cosplay, I was able to just like pop in and out of that one. So that one wasn't hard. And then of course, with Kira and Daenerys, like they're both Emilia Clarke, so I can keep the same makeup. So I was like, okay, that I can do. If I can swing it, that if it makes it easier for me makeup wise and heat wise, I'll do it. But typically I am not an AM PM. And like, man, all the blessings and sainthood to the cosplayers who are, because that's not me, not anymore.
Absolutely. Now, for people that have listened, and I want to thank you because we've definitely gone over like the hour that I generally allot for episodes, and I've really enjoyed having you as a guest.
I've enjoyed being here. Yes.
But for people that want to find you on the vast internet to either follow you on Twitter or Instagram or wherever you may be, what are the places that they can do so?
Okay, so Instagram, if you want to follow me for cosplay purposes and just kind of online shenanigans, definitely my Instagram is Reina Valentine Cosplay. All one word, no underscores or anything. And on that's my main cosplay central. If you want a cosplay page or more so a ranting session under the guise of a cosplay page, I'm on Twitter at Reina V Cosplay. But disclaimer on that one, I post way more rants and memes and randomness on Twitter than I do on Instagram. So cosplay only, follow me on Instagram, Reina Valentine Cosplay. Smidgens of cosplay and mostly yelling, follow me on Twitter at Reina V Cosplay. And Facebook, I got to get back on my Facebook. It's Reina Valentine Cosplay on Facebook. I have not used it in years, but I really want to get back on it. So that'll be cosplay only. So those are my presences. Presences? We'll go with that. At the moment online.
Okay. Well, I will have the links
Cool.
to those in the show notes and on our Facebook page and website. And Reina, I'm gonna wrap it up just again. I loved having you as a guest.
Oh,
I loved that you got so into it. I'm just everything was good. Your
oh
stories,
my goodness.
your fandom talk. So I really just want to say thank you so much for giving me not only like the hour, but like we're probably by the time it's edited, it'll be about a little bit over an hour and a half long,
Oh my goodness.
which
Yes.
love it. Like thank you so much.
This again, this is my first time on any podcast ever, and you set the bar so ridiculously high. Now, this was so much fun, and it was so awesome just having a natural, just chill fandom talk, cosplay talk conversation with with you. You're so cool, so awesome. I love this podcast. I had so much fun today. So thank you for even inviting me on. That's so unexpected, and I'm incredibly happy and thankful so much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Tales from the Fandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.